Welcome to the second episode of the third season of The Pulpiteer. I'm your host, Eric Hepburn, and I'm glad to have you join us for today's episode. Today's episode is called Feel Social Change, and it's the second of a four-part series exploring the social change ecosystem work of Deepa Iyer through the lens of the Enneagram Triads. So we'll begin with our Great World House segment, then our Word of Wisdom, read by Keith Hutchinson. We now pause to honor the great world house of which we are a part, lifting up the needs, the hopes, and the voices beyond these doors. 1 year ago, last weekend, the rivers of the hill country rose in the night. More than 130 of our neighbors died. In Kerr County, along the Guadalupe, and closer to home as well. The nation watched for a week. The frontline responders, we talked about them last Sunday, did their brave and urgent work. Then the cameras left, and the other work began. The year-long work. This anniversary week, the news from Kerrville isn't about rescue, it's about the 130 families who are back in their homes. And the counselors still sitting with children who are learning to sleep through the rain. There's a campaign there now in Kerrville with the most Texan name imaginable. Y'all okay? Neighbors checking on neighbors 1 year in because somebody has to keep asking after everyone else stops. Austin Dixon, who leads the Hill Country's Relief Foundation, a man who lost his own loved ones in the waters that night, said it this way: "You can be in grief, and you can also be hopeful at the same time." And that's very much where I am personally. And that is the work of caregivers and healers. It doesn't trend, it tends. And it is holy work. So hold the hill country in your hearts this morning, the grieving and the mending alike.
After the words are spoken, we will breathe together in silence until the ringing of the bowl calls us onward into the space where the word unfolds among us. We welcome this voice of wisdom carried through Don Riso and Russ Hudson. We seldom dare to be fully in our hearts. When we are, it is often overwhelming. We therefore substitute all kinds of reactions for the power of real feelings. This is the core dilemma of the feeling triad. For heart triad people, the deepest level, your heart qualities, are the source of your identity. When your heart opens, you know who you are, and that who you are has nothing to do with what people think of you and nothing to do with your past history. You have a particular quality, a flavor, something that is unique and intimately you. It is through the heart that we recognize and appreciate our true nature. When we are in contact with the heart, we feel loved and valued. Moreover, as the great spiritual traditions teach, the heart reveals that we are love and value. Our share in the divine nature means not only that we are loved by God, but that the presence of love resides within us. We are the conduit through which love comes into the world.
We are the conduit through which love comes into the world. That quote continues, "But when our hearts are closed and blocked off, however, not only do we lose contact with our true identity, but we don't feel valued or loved." Okay, before we dive into this week, I'm going to do a quick recap from last week. We talked last week about the instinctive triad, the part where our motivational energy comes from the gut and the body. Now, the concern of the instinctive triad is resistance and control of the environment. I think you can see that, how it surfaced in our three roles: our frontline responder, our disruptor, and our experimenter roles. People from the instinctive triad are seeking autonomy. And as we discussed at length last week, the underlying feeling that they struggle with the most is anger and rage, right? So we talked about, if you recognize the anger and rage in yourself, these pathways are ways that you can metabolize that rage into healthy, pro-social, pro-spiritual behavior. All right, today we're talking about the feeling triad. For those Enneagram nerds among you, that's 2, 3, and 4 Enneagram numbers. Now, I'm going to start here because I'm going to center this underlying feeling just like I did last week. The underlying feeling for feeling types, the thing that they struggle with is shame. And we're going to get into that. But I wanted to give you a preview of what was coming. They seek attention. Their issues are with identity and hostility. And I think you'll see that a little bit as we talk about it more deeply. And the two social change roles that people in this triad get drawn into, in my interpretation, are caregiving and healing. All right. I do want to issue a correction. A triad is linguistically a group of three things, right? And I talked about it last week because it's a third. It's a third in this system of the Enneagram, the triads. There are 3 triads because there are 9 categories. And so there are 3 triads, 3 groups of 3. So each group of 3 is both a third and a set of 3 at the same time. But I realized the way I spoke about it last week, it sounded like I was defining the word incorrectly. And that made my I want to be right part of my brain tickle a little. So I had to do the thing where I issue a correction and not teach you misleading things that get you scoffed at parties. Didn't you know that a triad means third? My minister said that. If you're already feeling offended by these negative descriptors, I want to remind you that each of these triads and each of these Enneagram types have within them positive and negative qualities. We're starting off with the negative qualities not because we want to center that, but because it's where recognition is easiest. It's easiest because of the 7-to-1 ratio, the fact that we're 7 times more sensitive to negative data than positive data. It makes it easier for you to see where you fit in if I describe the negative aspects of the triad instead of the positive aspects. Because here's what happens. And I've been in rooms where they've tried to do this. I could sit here and tell you the positive aspects of all 3 triads, and each time you'd go, oh, yeah, that's me. I'm like that on my good days. Yeah, totally. I can see myself in there. But when I describe the negative ones, it's not like, oh, that's me. It's like, oh, that's not me, but I know some people like that. And then it's like, oh, that's not me either, but I know some people like that. And then it's like, ugh. And that, what's that word that was up there? Shame. The shame starts to, oh, that's me. And not me in like a, I'm proud to be me, but that's me in a like, oh, that put your finger on the thing I struggle with the most. And therefore, it's the scariest, right? That resonance, though, is what helps you find your way, even though it's uncomfortable. So, we're talking about the feeling triad. I want to start by unpacking, using Brené Brown's work, the difference between shame and guilt. Because for feeling triad folks, this is a core tool for metabolizing shame into the more healthier pro-social emotion of guilt. So let's unpack that, because probably you're all thinking, can I have a life with neither of those, please? Maybe, but that would be a mistake-free life. And so it's unlikely, all things considered. So shame is the story I did something bad and I'm a bad person. That's why I wore this one today. Each of us is more than the worst thing we've ever done. Shame is, I made a mistake. I said something unkind to my partner's friend, child, spouse, boss. And I'm a bad person because I did that. That's shame. Guilt is, I did a bad thing. I did a bad thing. So shame is problematic because the bad thing becomes the identity, right? The bad thing becomes your identity. There's no way out of that for you, right? Oh, now I just have to accept I'm just a lousy person, right? So that's what shame does. And that's the gremlin that sits on the shoulder of feeling type 2 folks, is the constant worry that they're actually not a good person. That's the thing that haunts them. It's the reason why when their identities are challenged, they struggle with hostility, right? They want to show up and do this work, and if it doesn't work right, their reaction is, oh, I guess I wasn't good enough to do that. And I don't know, but when I read this, it really resonates with the people in my life who I've known who for sure show up as caregivers and healers for others. So, guilt is pro-social because you can recover from that, right? You can recover from I made a mistake or I did a bad thing if you don't adopt it as your identity, right? It was like, oh, I did this thing. I now need to make a repair or an amend to repair the relationship that was damaged when I did this bad thing. But the bad thing isn't who I am. It's just a mistake that I made. It was something that happened. So that is the difference between shame and guilt. And if feeling triad folks can amend their stories that they tell themselves from I'm a bad person to I did a bad thing, they are, as G.I. Joe used to say, knowing is half the battle. Like they're already halfway to being on a healthier path for themselves when they replace the story I'm a bad person with the story I made a mistake or I did a bad thing, right? And the rest of the half of the journey is then, oh, now that I did this bad thing, I have to use that part of me that wants to show up and heal and caregive to ask the question, okay, who did that bad thing that I did impact? How do I start to make a relationship repair? How do I undo the damage? How do I move forward and heal the relationship with people who are affected by the bad decision? And sometimes one of the main people affected by the bad decision is you, right? And then we have to engage in self-forgiveness or repairing with self. Like, oh, the mistake that I made was pretending that I had the energy of 17 people and now I'm burned out and run ragged. And the peacemaking I have to do with myself is to give myself permission to go to my boss and say, I need a week off and I'm going to go and rest. And I'm going to have a week where the only person I'm caretaking is me. This is another big challenge for feeling triad folks is they're real good at taking care of everyone else. They're also on the slip and slide to burnout almost all the time, right? Because while they are super attuned to what's going on with everybody else and they're ready to like zero in and hone in and make sure that you have your needs met, they are real bad at pausing and saying, wait, what are my needs? What do I need in this moment? Okay, everybody else they only want to do that when everyone else is all taken care of. Any of you ever had a moment in life where everybody else was all taken care of? Yeah, neither have they. Neither have they. They've never had that moment, but they're very convinced that just as soon as everybody else's needs are met, they can take care of themselves. But this goes back to a lesson from early in my parenting journey where the great wisdom of the put on your mask before you help somebody else with theirs, airplane wisdom, landed for me as a real parenting thing. Like, oh, yeah, if you don't put on your own mask, if you're not doing enough self-care, then it's going to just be bad. It's just going to be bad, right? So anyway, I could spend 3 sermons talking about that, but I'm not going to today. I'm going to spend this one sermon talking about something else. So we put on our own gas mask first, especially if we're a healing person. That feels challenging. Going back to the shame thing, one of the angles of shame that often gets activated in our healers and caregivers is that if I know that Chris is in pain and I don't immediately go help her because I'm busy putting on my own gas mask, that makes me selfish and a bad person. Like, that's the dynamic, right? Like, but I know that somebody else out there needs me right this second. And so I can't stop and put on my own gas mask because that would make me bad, right? That's the shame trigger. That would make me bad and selfish to ignore somebody else's pain and take care of myself first. Like, this is the lifelong struggle of feeling triad folks, right? But here's the amazing thing. When they learn to set healthy boundaries, they are amazing healers and caregivers. They are amazing because they're pouring from a cup that overflows, right? They are so good at channeling love through themselves. They're so good they'll burn out from it if they don't remember to do their self-maintenance. They'll literally let so much love flow through them that they've got nothing left over, and then they're burned out. But when they learn how to do their conduit maintenance, they can be tremendous fountains of love and care and healing into the world. So, I want to, if y'all are interested in this, you can read the Deepa Iyer book, but here's how the healer versus caregiver lands for me. So, there's an analogy. It probably started out as an ancient parable or story, but I wasn't able to find it or figure it out, probably because I didn't look hard enough. It goes like this. You come across a river, and floating down the river are injured children, like they've been shot with guns. They've got bullet wounds, and they're floating down the river. And so people immediately, of course, start pulling the bodies out of the river, not the bodies, the children. They pull the wounded children out of the river, and they get Band-Aids, and they start, putting Band-Aids on the wounds and tending to the needs and setting up a village and cots so they can heal, and they call, and the doctors come and the nurses come and all the people from the village, they go out to the thing, and they're pulling these kids out of the water and making sure they're getting food and they're getting water and they're getting their wounds healed up, and that is the caregivers. The caregivers are the ones who are like, immediate need, I need to address the symptom of the problem. It deserves love and attention. Let's go do it right now. So they're like the frontline responders of the caregiving, of the caregiving healing part of the picture, right? So that's them. Now the healer role is a little different. The healer is the person who, after doing this for a little while, says, this is all well and good. These children need love, attention, and they deserve healing. But I've got 2 problems here. One is Band-Aids doesn't seem like an appropriate response to bullet holes. And number 2 is, why are there children with bullet holes floating down the river? So healers like to ask the deeper question about causation and then go fix that as a general rule. Now, this is a metaphor. So it's not that they ignore people who are in pain, but even with the people who are in pain, where caregivers tend to focus on symptom relief, and I'm not denigrating that. I want you to hear me. We're going to wrap back to that. While caregivers focus on symptom relief for people who are currently struggling and in pain and having a hard time, healers are like, yes, but we can't, it's going to be all Band-Aids all day for the rest of our lives unless we ask the deeper question, what's making the pain? What's causing it? So that might mean on an individual basis, they're like, No, yeah, let's go out and have coffee, and you can complain to me and tell me how awful things are. But after we've done that once a week for 6 weeks, they're like, okay, I'm hearing the same story over and over again. There's something underneath it that we're not surfacing here. And that deeper thing that's underneath it is where the source is. That's where the source of the pain is, and we've got to go there. Now, a caregiver, and this is what happens when caregivers get in therapy roles, a caregiver is very content to just keep doing Band-Aids. They're like, oh, honey, if you want to pay me to come and complain to me for an hour a week or an hour a month for the next 30 years, I'm cool with that. I'm happy to reach it. I got some salve right here that's just perfect for that. Oh, you poor dear. You poor thing. Yeah. But healers are not content with that. They're not content with symptom relief. They're like, what is going on under the hood there? Now, you can even hear it in my own way of saying it, because I too, like all of you, am a deeply imperfect human being. But here's one of the things I want to highlight about Deepa Iyer's work and why I thought it was worth taking a whole month to talk about it. There is a tendency and a tension, depending on what kind of person you are, to start value hierarchying one role over another and why this one's better. I lean into healing. Like when I'm active in this triad in my life, I'm leaning into healing work, not caregiving work. Like, I'm like, yeah, you're in pain. We're all in pain. I get it. What's causing it? I mean, that's just me. But it also makes it super easy. It makes it an ego trap for me not to denigrate caregivers. And one of the beautiful things about the Deepa Iyer social justice ecology work is that it invites us to step back and be like, you don't have to do that. You don't have to do the ego thing where your role, the role that you play, is more important than everybody else's. By viewing it as an ecology and an ecosystem, we give ourselves not just permission, but encouragement to acknowledge the true, real, and beautiful value that each of these different ways of being and showing up and works together. Because here's the truth. If everybody was like me and everybody in the village charges up the river to find out who's throwing kids in the thing, all those kids who are floating down the stream, they die. They die in pain because there were no caregivers present. If everybody was showing up with that healer, I got to get to the root cause mentality. We need both. We need the people who are going to pull the bodies out of the river and be like, right now you're suffering, and that's the most important thing in the world to me. Let me help you. People who show up like that are a necessary part of an ecology where the happenstance of life. That's what I think. That's how I think about a lot of the bad stuff that happens. Now, some of the bad stuff that happens in the world is human self-inflicted. Oh, we started that war. Oh, we made that weapon of mass destruction. Oh, we launched that missile or drone attack. But when the river rises in the night and tragedy happens, justice can only manifest in the wake of that unchosen unfairness. Justice can only manifest in the wake of that unchosen unfairness by how we respond to that moment. Do we show up to our neighbors and offer them a place to stay? Do we bring them blankets? Do we set up a meal train? Do we do the things that help them get rehoused or have a place to stay while their house is getting rebuilt? All those things that make justice out of unfairness are things that we choose. Does that make sense to everybody? So, both things are super important. So let's talk about like the Kerrville thing. Super important that there are people who were like, the most important thing is we've got to get counseling for the kids who lost a bunch of friends so that they can try to heal from that event. So they need direct caregiving. People need food. People need shelter. People need housing. And then some other people, the more systemic side people who were and we need changes in our river management policy. So we need somebody who's going to show up to the state government and the county government and advocate for better policies so that the structural conditions that contributed to the unfairness happening are better. because it still wasn't okay for 130 people to die, because we could have prevented it if we had done XYZ. Okay, so are you guys starting to get a picture of why both of those roles are equally important? And the other beautiful thing about Deepa Iyer's work, and I think it's most obvious with the case of caregivers and healers, is that especially for the feeling triad folks, if you're a caregiver, you might feel a lot of shame about not being a healer. And if you're a healer, you might feel a lot of shame about not being a better caregiver. But this system says, no, that's just another trap. Don't do that to yourself. Like, ask the question, how am I called to show up? Me, just the way I am. I'm good enough. I am enough, just the way I am. How do I want to respond? And there is no shame in being the Band-Aids on bullet wounds person. And there is no shame on leaving the kids in the river and going to find out who's shooting them. There's no shame in either of those. But you can't do both at once. And it's okay for you to be called into whatever role fits for you without shame. Because I'm saying the same thing in two different ways. Because the shame and the judgment are the same thing. They're not two different things. We're talking about two different ways that you experience them emotionally. But sitting in judgment about what you're doing or someone else is doing and feeling shame about it, that's just one mechanism, and you're looking at two different facets of it in your own experience. If you want to know how to walk into a room and not have that feeling like everyone is judging me and thinking this about my hair, my clothes, my whatever, if you want to know how to walk into a room without experiencing that, you have to find out how to be the person who walks into the room without doing that to anyone in the room. Those are the same answer. The only way that you get to show up in that room and be absolutely inured to whether anyone is judging you is to be the person who walks into the room without a single judgment of the people you see. That's it. It's the only way. Or the only way I've found. The only way that I've heard talked about compellingly or convincingly by others. It sounds like a magic trick, doesn't it? Now, some of you are thinking, yeah, but that's not stopping them from judging me. No. But it's stopping you from caring. And it's setting a healthy boundary about the only thing that you can control, and that even imperfectly, as we all know. Even the stuff on this side of the veil, the inside, not fully controllable, like somewhat manageable on a good day. But if you can learn that magic trick of walking into a room without judgment about anyone else, you can feel what it's like to be free of a care about their judgment of you. It does also dissuade them from making the judgments because there's no meat to it anymore, but that takes a little longer. That's not an instantaneous thing. So, last week we emphasized this idea that a way to know that you're called to be, that you might find your jam in the role of disruptor or experimenter or frontline worker is if your reaction to the news cycle is that you're pissed off all the time. That your anger and rage are the thing that you experience the most saliently when you watch the news, and the news is about the latest injustice. Now, what does that look like for these folks? How does that land? If your main reaction when you watch the news is, I'm not doing enough. If your main reaction when you watch the news is, I'm not doing enough, that's the voice of shame. if you can't stop beating yourself up that you can't figure out the next clever thing to do in the face of all this injustice and unfairness, if your main reaction is to beat yourself up for not knowing what to do next, not doing enough of it, not doing the few things that you know you should just because you're too exhausted and worn out after your day of caregiving in whatever job you have. So you're going to go home and beat yourself up because you just saw the news and there's nothing you can do about it. But instead of saying there's nothing I can do about it, you'd rather spend time castigating yourself about how little you can do or have done or how you should, or shoulding all over yourself and saying, oh, I should be doing this, I should be doing that, I should be better. That is the shame gremlin showing up in your life, telling you that your main struggle is to learn how to put on your own gas mask first, so that when moments appear in your life, you can show up and be in that real moment the caregiver and healer or healer that life is calling you to be. But the beating yourself up is the first thing that's in your way. And the second thing that's in your way is recognizing this is mine and this is the stuff I can't control. You see that this is mine and this is the stuff I can't control. This is the same message about how to walk into a room without feeling judged. Once again, it's the same thing. We're just talking about it from a slightly different angle. I don't know what else to say about that, so I'm hoping it was clear. Shame whispers that you are not enough to be loved. Shame whispers that you are not enough to be loved. But you were never meant to be the destination of love. You are the conduit through which love comes into the world. It is possible for that whisper to be answered. And when it is, you learn to heal not only yourself, but those around you. May it be so, and amen. Until next time, thank you for joining us on The Pulpiteer. If you enjoyed the podcast, you can help others find it by liking and subscribing. If you'd like to support the podcast directly, you can make a donation at sangabrieluu.org/give. The Pulpiteer podcast is a production of the San Gabriel Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Georgetown, Texas. The podcast is hosted by Spotify, and theme music is by John Faber. Our live recording tech crew is Frank Sanders, Rob Berthold, Keith Hutchinson, and Andrea McDaniel. The podcast is produced and performed by Eric Hepburn. See you next time.